Every single Christmas there's one tradition I like to keep, and that is that I have to watch A Christmas Carol without fail. But there are so many different versions of A Christmas Carol out there. There's actually over 130 adaptations. I'm willing to bet there's possibly more, and because of this it makes it hard to pick just one. So I actually watch as many of my favourite versions as possible. And today I'm going to run through some of my favourites in no particular order because I literally do love all of these adaptations. But I'm kind of contradicting myself now. I will be keeping my favourite for last. So first on my list is a 1951 Alright. Who are you?
That's me always.
Very well then, who were you?
I am, and always will be, the ghost of Christmas past. And judging by all this nostalgia, I think you've got the right ghost.
What do you want?
Well, the way I see it, if you're going to do one of those moving picture thingies on A Christmas Carol, you're going to need a ghost. I'm your man. Ghost man. Ghost man. Okay, can you sit? I can. Well, you don't believe in me?
I don't.
Well, what makes you doubt your senses? Because the smallest of things can affect them. A slight stomach disorder can make them cheat. You could be an undigested bit of beef, a blob of mustard, a mouldy crumb of cheese. There's more of gravy than of grave about you. Satisfied? Okay. So here's what we'll do. I'll introduce some moving pictures, then you go ahead and tell us what you think.
So the first
moving picture is 1951 Scrooge starring Alistair Sim.
Yeah, the first on my list is a 1951 classic Scrooge as it was called in the UK and A Christmas Carol in the US starring Alistair Sim as Ebenezer Scrooge. Now I consider this to be the ultimate classic version of the movie from what I like to call the black and white era. The entire cast really did do a grand performance and Alistair Sim as Ebenezer Scrooge really does shine in this movie. And he really does do a great job at bringing Scrooge to life on the screen, just as Charles Dickens described him in his book. As a tight-fisted, hand at the grindstone, squeezing, wrenching, grasping, scraping, clutching, curvaceous old sinner. And Sim does a really good job at making you believe all of the above. And as the movie goes on, you can see just how good Sim's acting is as he gradually makes his way from his transformation from his cruel ways to the giddy, happy, childlike character we get at the end of the movie, when his redemption is complete. Now, as for the movie's special effects, they are of course very dated now. After all, it was made in 1951, but somehow it still holds up, especially since this movie has heart, and it is carried so well by its stellar cast, who truly do make this movie shine. And that is exactly why it is so many people's choice to watch this version every year without fail. The next moving picture is 1983's Mickey's Christmas Carol starring Scrooge McDuck. Now, as a kid, I absolutely loved Mickey Mouse, so it's safe to say that I was absolutely enchanted by this version of A Christmas Carol that was given the Disney treatment and starred Mickey Mouse and friends such as Goofy, Donald Duck, Minnie Mouse and Jiminy Cricket, as well as others who play the classic characters from the book. And Scrooge was played by who else but Scrooge McDuck himself. Now, this adaptation released way back in 1983, and of course DuckTales premiered in 1987, so at first I thought that Scrooge McDuck must have been created, especially for this adaptation of A Christmas Carol. Well, I was wrong. Scrooge McDuck was actually created in 1947 and was actually named after Scrooge, the character created by Charles Dickens. So there was no other Disney character who was more perfect to play the role of Ebenezer Scrooge than Scrooge McDuck. Now, the cartoon itself is only 26 minutes long, and considering this, Disney do an amazing job at squeezing in as much as possible. Many may say that it should have been a longer film, but I feel that the length of the movie was actually fine and very enjoyable. And Disney don't disappoint on the animation, that is done beautifully. The animation is all hand-drawn to perfection before the days of CGI, and the bright colours really do pop and really do capture the feeling of Christmas, as well as the darker tones that come with the story later on. Now, what I like most about this version is the hand-drawn animation, which is sadly something you don't see much of anymore, which makes this version a real pleasure to watch.
The next moving picture is 1999's A Christmas Carol starring Patrick Stewart.
That's right, this adaptation was released in 1999 and stars Sir Patrick Stewart, and I must admit, when I first spotted this DVD a few Christmases ago, my initial thought was that there is no way Jean-Luc Picard could pull off Ebenezer Scrooge. Oh man, was I wrong, and after watching it, it fast became one of my favourite adaptations. I should have known better considering Patrick Stewart's very successful career on Broadway and the West End. Patrick Stewart is truly amazing in this movie, and he really does do a great job as Ebenezer Scrooge in a very earnest version of this made-for-TV movie that took a lot of inspiration from the Alistair Sim version that we have already talked about. And here's a fun fact for you, Patrick Stewart was cast as Scrooge after actually playing the character in a one-man show of A Christmas Carol on Broadway that was very successful. In short, Stewart was absolutely perfect in this role, chewing up the scenery and breathing new life into the much-loved character of Scrooge.
The next moving picture is 2009's A Christmas Carol starring Jim Carrey.
Now, I do love this movie and I think it's probably one of the most complete adaptations out there, but as much as I do like this version, there are some parts of the movie I do have issues with, but regardless, it still makes my list because I do think it is a very good adaptation and it is really enjoyable. So what exactly do I have issues with? Well, first of all, the CG animation, which for most of the movie is absolutely beautiful, and the attention to detail to the era and the very attractive visuals really do make the movie enchanting at times. However, some of the characters' faces just looked off, not quite right, and some even looked horrific. But that isn't to say it's all bad. The way they created Ebenezer Scrooge's face, for instance, was good, but I felt some of the supporting characters just looked plain freaky, and in a weird way they held your attention just at how strange they actually looked. Now, as well as this, the movie was released in 3D, which I don't have an issue with. I actually do like some 3D movies, but there are a few scenes that have obviously been made for 3D, with images popping out of the screen into the audience faces. Disney even created a totally new part of the story where Scrooge is shrunk down and chased through the streets by a ghostly horseman, and it's clear to see that this part of the movie was filmed for the 3D effects, and it does kind of bring you out of the story. That being said, Jim Carrey really does give his all as Scrooge. The movie was mocap, so all of Scrooge's mannerisms and movements are totally his, and he really does do a great job. And apart from those few faults I have, I actually enjoy this movie a lot.
The next moving picture is 1988's Scrooged, starring Bill Murray.
Now, this movie isn't a straight up adaptation of A Christmas Carol, and in some ways it is. You may actually call it a spoof more than anything. This movie stars Bill Murray, but not as Ebenezer Scrooge, but as Frank Cross, who is in so many ways just like Scrooge. In the movie, Frank plays a television president who is organising a very different version of A Christmas Carol for a live broadcast. He's pushy, selfish, and simply does not care for anyone but himself, even going as far as to firing an employee on Christmas Eve. And it isn't long before Frank is visited by the ghost of his mentor, who, just like Marley in A Christmas Carol, pays Frank a visit to tell him to change his ways before it's too late, and he might escape the fate that fell upon him. Frank is then visited by the three ghosts, but they are not quite the same as the original Christmas Carol ghosts. The Ghost of the Christmas Past is a magical, excitable, cigarette-chomping taxi driver. The Ghost of Christmas Present is a sweet-talking, glittery furry who seems to take delight in violently kicking, punching and slapping Frank. And the Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come is a towering Grim Reaper with a television set in his hood. Murray is absolutely brilliant in this movie, and like always, he is hilarious in every single scene, but when he needs to bring the emotion, he does not disappoint, as you see the familiar slow redemption as you approach the end of the movie, where in my opinion he gives one of the best performances he's ever given. Well, maybe, but he does give one of the most heartfelt speeches with tears of joy once his redemption is complete, and it always leaves you with a warm, fuzzy feeling.
It's a good feeling. It's really better than I felt in a long time.
Scrooge really is one of my favourite adaptations of A Christmas Carol, which really isn't A Christmas Carol, but a crazy kind of spoof of the classic Christmas tale, and it's one that I will always revisit year after year.
And the final moving picture is A Muppets Christmas Carol from 1992 starring Michael Caine and the Muppets.
Now, like I said, I've saved my absolute favourite adaptation of A Christmas Carol till last, and here it is. The last movie on my list has got to be my all-time favourite, and if for whatever reason I can only watch one version of A Christmas Carol, it will always be this one, The Muppet Christmas Carol.
What are we doing?
Nothing.
What?
Well, just hold on.
What?
I still remember to this day asking for this movie on VHS one Christmas way back in 1993, and I begged that I be allowed to have it early so I could watch it over and over again before Christmas Day, and to my delight, I was allowed to. Now, I can't explain how this movie made me feel as a kid and how it makes me feel to this very day as an adult. It literally fills me with joy. It's got to be one of my all-time favourite Christmas movies, not just a Christmas Carol movie, but Christmas movies. Now, I can't put my finger on it, but there always seemed to be something different about this movie, something special. It didn't quite feel like the other Muppet movies, it felt different. It could have been due to the fact that this was the first Muppet movie made since Jim Henson's death, or it may have been the fact that it was a Christmas movie. Or it may be the fact that this movie utilised different filming techniques, introducing green screen trickery and really nice set pieces that looked obviously fake, but somehow oozed charm. Now, normally in a Muppet movie it's Kermit who carries the movie, but this time around it's Gonzo and Rizzo the Rat, who take us on a delightful journey, keeping us up to date with the story as we follow Scrooge. And who played Ebenezer Scrooge? None other than Michael Caine, who is absolutely perfection in this role. I love every second that he's on screen, and he really does do a great job acting alongside the Muppets. And when he's mean, oh boy is he mean.
How would the bookkeepers like to be suddenly
Unemployed!
But as his journey through the story progresses, you really see that transformation take place, and you start to sympathise with Scrooge and root for him to be a better man. This movie has tons of heart and warmth. The storytelling is fantastic and the comedy is ever present, but not enough to take you out of the story. And the songs, oh man, the songs are brilliant. Every single one is a hit, whether it be in the opening song Scrooge, which is sang by every single Muppet on screen, or One More Sleep Till Christmas, sang by Kermit and the Bookkeepers, or Marley and Marley, not only Jacob Marley but Robert Marley, who were played by the two Muppets, Statler and Waldorf. And because of this scene, because of this film, for the longest time I thought Jacob Marley was actually two separate characters. It was only later when I discovered the other versions of A Christmas Carol that I learned that they'd changed it slightly for this version of A Muppet Christmas Carol. And then of course there's Thankful Heart, which is probably one of my favourite songs from this movie. There was also a love song somewhere in the middle of the movie that was sung by Belle, Scrooge's old love interest. For some reason now it's missing from the DVDs. I think Disney thought it slowed the movie down and it kind of bored children and brought them out of the story. I miss it being in the film, but I must admit as a child I did get bored around that point, but as an adult I wish it was back in. And then of course there's the delightful three Muppets who played the Christmas Ghosts, who I believe were made from scratch especially for this movie. As I said before, The Muppet Christmas Carol has been my favourite adaptation of this story and my favourite Christmas film ever since 1993, and to this day it still is. What's your favourite Christmas Carol?
Well, I would say my job's done here. I would say the inclusion of a ghost in your video actually helped it improve, and you're welcome. Have a very nice Christmas.
Did I forget something, big man?
God bless